Welcome to PowerUp podcast, the podcast that seeks to empower and dismantle, giving us the power and confidence to question, deconstruct, rebuild, and expand in life. I'm your host, Amma Rouge, voiceover and multidisciplinary artist, well-being advocate, food and book geek with over 14 years of movement-centered experience.
I am your host, Ella Mesma, artist, choreographer, yogi and coach with a passion for alchemy, creativity, transformation and workplace wellness.
We recognise that we can't dismantle and empower or be empowered without first learning ourselves, diving deeper to unlearn the harmful, restrictive and unprogressive. It's an ongoing practice and journey for us all, which is why we created this podcast.
Our show features guests doing the work to enlighten, deconstruct and power up in their own magical ways.
We're going to be having conversations around the power of healing, transformation, well-being and creativity, and how they feed our personal and collective evolution, how they help us power up.
Today, we are welcoming the amazing Seeta Patel. Born in London, Seeta has worked with a range of Bharatanatyam and contemporary dance professionals and toured with many companies, including DV8 Physical Theatre, Shobana Jeyasingh Dance Company, and Gandini Juggling. Seeta has presented sold-out work at the Southbank Centre, Royal Opera House, ROH2 and Sadler's Wells. In tandem with her choreographic and performing work, she has worked in film, TV and theatre, including producing a multi-award-winning short dance film, The Art of Defining Me, being a judge, mentor and advisor for the inaugural BBC Young Dancer Competition, and choreographing a play at the Theatre Royal Stratford East, The House of In-Between. Her work, Not Today's Yesterday, is a one-woman show taking a dramatic look at the whitewashing of history. The show won Best Dance and the Peace Foundation Award at the Adelaide Fringe. Most recently, Seeta created a Bharatanatyam version of the iconic ballet The Rite of Spring, touring in 2019 and to be expanded in 2023 for Sadler's Wells and Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra. Welcome, Seeta.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So happy to have you. Welcome. What a bloody bio. Oh my gosh. I've already said bloody. So Seeta, apparently I say bloody all the way through all the episodes. And I never realised until Ella pointed it out. And I've already said it. What a bloody bio.
Thank you. It's strange hearing someone else read about you yourself, in that way.
Yeah, I bet.
Super impressive. It's super inspiring hearing all the things you've done. Even, your statement on your website, just, it really feels like you're someone who lives by your values in everything you do. It's beautiful.
I really try to. It's hard because you have to survive as well. And that means often feeling like you're compromising. But yeah, I try not to.
Do you feel the gravity of what you've achieved thus far and what you've created? Do you feel ripples from it, or does it feel kind of simply like, well, it's me on my journey and it is what it is?
I'd say the latter. It feels like it's just me on my journey, and then every so often someone will reach out to me and just say thank you for the inspiring work I'm doing, or the things I post on social media about kind of the activism stuff I pursue. And, it's really heartening because it is a very lonely place to be when you're trying to challenge things in a way that will create actual change and not just sort of talking about change, I think. And it's a lonely place. And I don't really feel, I get lost, I think, in the minutiae of it and the day-to-day kind of energy that's expelled doing that stuff, rather than seeing the bigger picture where I might see the ripples. But yeah, when people reach out to me, it does make a big difference. To show me that it's not just for my benefit that I'm doing these things, that I'm really affecting people. And if you affect one person, I think that's valuable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's something to be said, isn't there, in people actually reaching out to you to say thank you or to say well done when you're doing something well that has actually impacted them or impacting people positively, because I feel that people are often really quick to reach out when they're unhappy with something or they don't think someone's doing something well. When you're working within activism as well, or you are an activist, like you said, it can be very lonely, it can be very draining. We've heard that quite a bit from other artists we've spoken to.
Absolutely. I think, and it's not, you don't do these things for the thank, but like I said, I value the people contacting me to say some of the things I post about, which are, largely to do with articles or things that I think people should be reading or things they should be thinking about, more so than I think about the stage work that I do. And they're just saying that was beautiful, I really enjoyed seeing it. I'm of course I'm grateful for them saying that, and it's nice to hear lovely things, but I think it sort of fills my cup more when the more challenging stuff is acknowledged, that it's shifting people's thinking.
I feel like this is a good time to ask you about that response on your website to Black Lives Matter. And PowerUp podcast, we talk often about our superpowers, and that opening line, you say that you're still learning, but your superpower feels like throwing yourself into lots of fires. And that really resonates here in terms of what we're discussing. It'd be lovely to hear some more about like what those fires are and the bravery that takes.
So I wrote this. Normally, when if you write something quite lengthy and you're going to make it public, put it into the public sphere, I don't know how other people work, but I would definitely reread it and change things and that sort of thing and tweak it. But this just sort of poured out of me because of the frustration, because of the sadness, because of the fatigue, and I didn't change any of it. It came out of me just this way, and I just put it out and I shared it with every person in power in my sphere of influence that I possibly could. And some people reached out, some people didn't. That wasn't the purpose for me at all. But I compiled a resource as well, again, of articles, little bits of learning and things like this that you see on social media. And I just collected a lot of it, and I read everything, and I thought, these are the things I think people should be looking at. If they're not able to look at everything, I'm going to put it together for people, and they can take their time to do it. Whether they do or don't, I don't know. But I just felt, people in power, you don't know, they get everybody, not just them, but we all get caught up with our day-to-day things. And sometimes if someone points something out to you, you're more likely to read it. And so it was born of frustration for sure. But it was also born out of me realizing that I'm at a stage in my career and my work that is about leadership, and I participated in leadership programs and with other leaders and other emerging leaders, and I really realized that we're just replicating a lot of leaders who just talk and don't do. And so it was really speaking to that frustration at that point and asking people, well, if there's some way that you can do something that, someone like me can't, or vice versa, that's where are you willing to kind of show your allyship in a true way? So I know that my way is throwing myself into fires by having difficult conversations with people who don't want to or don't seek out those conversations. And maybe that's a foolish endeavor, batting my head against a brick wall, but it's something I do because a lot of these people are in positions where they hold resource, where they hold a lot of power to make change, but they don't. So I'm putting myself in front of their faces, which is the sort of fires. Whereas I know that there's other ways to do it. There are other ways to do it, like, that could be considered more diplomatic or softer touch and that kind of thing. And that's just not where my superpower lies. It doesn't lay true with myself in a way of being, to always, curtail what I need to say. And I'm learning. It's not that I want to, I'm not offensive or those sorts of things in terms of raising my voice or swear words or anything like that. But the things I bring up are challenging for people, and that gives them a negative experience of me. And sometimes they just need to hear it from someone just like them. You know, sometimes white people need to hear it from white people, and men need to hear it from men, and they don't want to admit it, but it makes it different for them.
Or maybe they're just very defensive and not able to receive the truth.
Absolutely. Or they, worse than ever in the arts, is they often don't feel they're part of the problem. Because we're in the arts, why would we be part of the problem? But we certainly have a lot of people who are, and we all, including myself, need to be very aware of that. And so, you know, in that sense, I was also, in my statement, was calling out for allyship from people who have a different way and who can complement something to move forward if you can't do it yourself, you know, and to seek what that is. Because a lot of people, when I put things out, they struggle with feeling overwhelmed or feeling like they need to heal from these traumatic things that they read about. And so I do say in there, healing is so important, but it can't be a stationary place or a place that you stay forever. You have to come out of that healing space. Otherwise, it becomes a self-absorbed, indulgent exercise for that. And unless you have a really, really, you know, clinical problem where actually if you're involved in these difficult things that you're going to harm yourself or something, that's a different thing. But for the regular person, and people say to me, oh, but Seeta, it's really hard. I need to read and reflecting and healing. Both things are important, but they can't be the only thing, and they can't be a constant. If they want change. And I know that some people, and I shouldn't refer to myself, I'm trying not to talk about myself in these negative terms, but you really do kind of, you know, take it in so much, internalize it so much when people make you feel like you're a difficult human being, or that you're heavy-handed, or, you know, sometimes I call myself an alpha female as a sort of joke, because I am quite forthright in that sense. But that's just a truth to myself. And yeah, I don't want to have to apologize for that, but I know that there are other ways, 100%. And maybe that's where I seek support from and allyship from people who are maybe have different ways. But also, I don't want to be gaslit in the process, if that makes sense.
I think that these words, you know, that you feel these descriptions are being attached to you as a woman, and that we have to apologize, you know, that this is a kind of an expected thing, that we should apologize for speaking our truth or speaking up. And I think it's actually, you know, it might feel like a difficult place and a lonely place, but you are lighting other fires by doing what you're doing. And certainly, for myself, and I can't speak for Amma, but I feel it, that reading it lights us up too. And it's like, yes, I might have a very different way of doing it, but actually it's that, yes, and this is what I want to do, this is the person I want to be, and this is the way I want to live my life. So thank you.
No worries. And also just to say that I think fear and apathy are some of the biggest issues for lack of progressive change. And, you know, when people feel overwhelmed or they feel like what they do isn't enough, you know, you have to understand that even if you do a tiny thing and it's within your sphere of influence, you're not going to, you know, you're not the prime minister or the president of a country or something like that, where, you know, it might have further reaches. But these big problems, there are small and really important ways that you can be changing and shifting that, whether it's through your language, or whether it's how you, you know, how you raise your children, or how you stand up for friends, or whatever that might be, or in your workplace. And we have to make it into a manageable way so that we don't feel completely impotent. And, you know, kind of just paralyzed by the bigness of it all.
Well said.
I think this comes back to values as well, of like knowing what your values are, and then knowing that where are you not willing to compromise, and how do you stand for that.
Are we right in understanding, Seeta, that you've just created or are in the process of creating a short film, Very British Museum?
We've made it. We shot it in the little break last year when we could get together and do things, and then we edited it and premiered on January 19th this year.
Amazing.
And since then it's also been at another festival in Egypt, which had a live audience, which was lovely, so they screened it on a big screen.
And then we want to keep working on it really, and see if we can do a bigger, longer film, because there's definitely enough to talk about.
Could you tell us a little bit about it? And just for any listeners who don't know anything about it, could you give us a little
So I'll try. Sorry if I ramble. Basically, the idea was born from a different theatre stage sort of work that I wanted to create with some colleagues, and we were having lots of brainstorming, and the stage work, which is still in nowhere near kind of, in the studio space of development, it's just brainstorming still. We created lots of ideas for different scenes, which would be performed by three characters: a black body, a black male body, a white male body, and an Indian female body. And we know that that's not representative of the full spectrum of humanity, but we thought that these sort of three people could embody different kinds of relationships where you could see what happens in a hierarchy of a situation. So, for example, the British Museum idea was that if you're seeing a plinth with a body of a certain type on it, and the language that you hear around it, whether it's in reviews or whether it's in the media or whether it's in a how it's exhibited at a museum. If it's been looted from a colonial, pursuit or that kind of thing. And so we created one of these scenes because I was invited to a small video commission by Chaps Palace in Hackney, and no money. I'm not at a stage in my career where I really was interested to do work without resource, but it had been a year where I hadn't made anything, and I asked my collaborators, and we were all like, yeah, let's just do it. We didn't pay ourselves, and we were just like, let's just do it because it's a good idea. So the film is essentially, it's like going on a tour in a museum where you're looking at these three different bodies, and what you're hearing, the script is composed of excerpts and tweaks of these excerpts from the sort of old 1950s British pathé black and white documentaries. So it's a very specific kind of language that they use, very proud of their nation and proud of their pursuits, and an older, white-sounding posh man doing this delivery. And it's not even talking all the time about what you see, but it's talking about buildings or architecture or the way that other bodies are described in Empire and that kind of thing. And so we pull these from these old documentaries and we created a script. So it's not matching all the time what you see, but there are moments where it matches, and you're just kind of like, okay, so we're looking at a white body and we're describing this beautiful, epic architecture, and you're talking about intellect. And then when you're talking about the black male body, you're talking about it being a cabinet of curiosities, or, using words like modifying these bodies in a different way. And then it just gets more and more into that. And it's specifically not called the British Museum because there are many institutions, not just museums, but lots of places that have benefited from the history of, colonialism and empire.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's got the indefinite article of a very British Museum. And if you see the posters and artwork for the project, there are asterisks where the eyes are in British, so it almost looks like a swear word, which I get a lot. I get quite a kick out of seeing my title written down. So, and I think it very much speaks to work that has been happening for quite a while, but that there's also a push now, and as you can see in the papers and things, that there are places around the world that are now starting to give some objects and artifacts back. The Benin bronzes from certain places being one of the very specific things, because the way that those artifacts were looted was really horrific. And, it's just about bringing these subjects out into a place, and, my sphere of influence, where maybe some people wrote to me saying we'd never even been to the British Museum or we didn't see it. And now they're interested into it more. Other people know very much about what's going on, and seeing it in an art form like that in an art piece that we made gave them a really visceral connection with it, because you see the trauma created on these bodies in the way that we've portrayed it.
Amazing. Banging, just absolutely banging. I'm all for it. Like, in all the different ways of shouting loudly, I'm so for it.
That's the thing. I almost feel sometimes I didn't want to limit myself by being a choreographer and a dancer, so I removed the word dance film from the description of the project. I know he said we used movement. And yes, all three characters in the film are dancers because we didn't have time and resource. So actually they pick up things, and if we had a different set of skills, not skills, if we had a different amount of resources, maybe I would have become more choreographic in it. But I almost didn't feel it needed it, because, when you don't have much resource and you have to really refine something to its bare essence, it didn't need it. I think it ended up, if I had had the time to choreograph something, it might have become a distraction, potentially. So it was just sort of, using these bodies to illustrate the ideas and reflect it, kind of not reflect it, but have these bodies and the images that were created with them going with the text and bringing together a new idea, or an idea that was, bigger than the sum of its parts.
I love anything that provokes in that way and informs and educates and allows the viewer or the listener or the audience to draw conclusion, and to open and expand their thought process and what they may have previously understood. Hearing you describe it, and you were saying that you want to work further on it, or you want to develop it further, do you want to share with us any ideas on that and how you're thinking of doing that?
I mean, when I've been very kind of very engaged in reading around this stuff. I'm currently reading Empire Land by Satnam Sangera, and listening to talks. This is my work, and the collaborators in the work that we've made is a tiny, tiny drop in the ocean and conversation. And you see the work and you see the work and research and activism that people are doing, like Satnam, like Alice Proctor, who's another person that is just doing amazing work in the field, Dan Hicks from the Pitt Rivers Museum, and so many people. And you're just like, Seeta, this is just such a remedial way of showing this. I started having major doubts, thinking, was this too simplistic? But then I gave myself a break, thinking, well, actually this is part of a journey. It's almost a proof of concept, and once we get more resource, I think we can develop further into the nuance of some of these things. And we did an overarching kind of look at how brown and black bodies, the violence in the language, the violence in how we view them in this film. But I think there's a lot more going on in that. We want to give identity to some of these characters that we're talking about, and rather than just this overarching overview, which is something that we couldn't dig into at this point. And look at some of the pushback and the kind of the pushback from the, in India it was Gandhi and his sort of home rule, and females fighting with the suffrage movement and those sorts of things. So I think there's a lot more to explore, and I won't rest until I've kind of gotten the resource to do some more of that in a better way.
Amazing, and for sure, it's really important work, and we speaking for the public would love to see it. Is there any other way that our viewers, our listeners might be able to see that performance later on?
We're not quite ready to share it publicly because we want to do more with it.
And it feels like this is starting to flow into this kind of the question of this series. We're really interested in identity and creativity, and how those, where is that intersection? And we would love to ask you whether that, how much do you feel your identity is a part or is interwoven into who you are and what you create as an artist, or do you feel that it's not a part of what you make?
I think sometimes it is, because it's inevitable because of some of the strange things that people say. Or once I was fired from an agency who outsourced dance teachers to schools just to give taster workshops, and obviously as a Bharatanatyam dancer, that's what they wanted me to teach. So my first job, this was more than 10 years ago, 15 years ago now, and so I went to some school that they sent me to in the middle of England, and a kid, they were 6-7 years old, a kid put up his hand at the beginning of the session, said, "Miss, how long did it take you to get here from India this morning?" And I said, I didn't come from India, I came from London, I drove in the car. And it took a couple of hours. And then I began to explain. I said, Indian dance a long time ago was only done in India, but now it's all over the world, and people from Japan and France and America and all over the world do it. I said, it's just like speaking English. It's not just in England that you speak English. And then I proceeded to teach the class. Then that evening when I got home, the agency phoned me up because a teacher of that class who had been observing the workshop complained that I didn't pretend I was from India. And the agency, who was run by a British Jamaican person, actually said, well, what's the problem? You should have just pretended, what's the problem? You're just, creating a story for them. And at the age of 26, when I'd only been a professional for 3 years, I really didn't know what to do or what was going on. And anyway, that whole experience led to producing a film called The Art of Defining Me, which you can actually see. We've released that after 8 years of keeping it private. We've now released it publicly, which is a parody on how, our identity is commodified, especially in the arts and the subsidised art sector, for which I'm very grateful to the subsidised arts sector, because I wouldn't be able to make work without the Arts Council. But I think it's an important light to be shone on how sometimes people from certain demographics are expected to almost play that demographic even more. So in that sense, yes, my identity was very much part of that. But I personally, I think I'm quite boring. I've had a very lucky sort of situation in life, but I know that I form part of a demographic that isn't, that it is sort of a minority in lots of situations, and there's still a fight and a struggle. I'm a woman of colour. I'm not from a wealthy background, so all of those things tie me into the greater politics of a bigger identity, which I think is present in all my work, rather than my personal individual Seeta Patel. This is the journey she went through. I mean, I was very lucky to escape racism during my time at school, whereas at the same school 5 years before me, my sister really struggled. I just happened, I liken my childhood as like walking through 6 lanes of opposing traffic and coming out unscathed. It's not that the traffic wasn't there. I just happened to be really lucky in that situation. Those just things that happen to other people. And so I don't want to be oblivious to that. So I'm very much centered around the fact that I am a person that has many privileges and one that doesn't have many privileges. And I see both sides of that at any given point. And so when I ask people to challenge themselves, in whether it's through my work or through how I speak, I also need them to know that there's something I do for myself. I'm not playing the victim in this space. And so, identity is important because I want to be connected to the world. I'm not interested necessarily just making something pretty. And if I want to make something pretty and that isn't political, I just think it still is political, because I've made The Rite of Spring, and that's a well-worn work, but I'm presenting it in the art form of Bharatanatyam on big stages. Big stages, that act in itself of seeing a work like that on those stages is political. And when I talk about it, even though the content of the work itself is about joyous dance and music, where I'm being allowed to present it, so when a newspaper reviews my version, which is a 6-person version, and compares my work to Pina Bausch and makes it less so for not being like that, it makes me think, well, you know what? Pina Bausch's first iteration of The Rite of Spring was with double the number of people that I have. There's no way on this planet that anybody would have given me money to make work on 12 dances at my stage of my career with my art form. It was a risk in itself. It paid off to support me, and now I can grow it. But it's unfair to put those parameters on me at this stage in my career, because there aren't places where I can just pluck dancers who are going to be able to do this in the way that I want them to. Most of them don't, I've had to look internationally. I'm not like someone that's gone through, White Lodge or Rambert, where through my process I have a body of dancers who, a group of dancers who are all homogeneously trained that I can pluck to make something and make my name in this place on those platforms. They don't take into consideration the context and the history of that. And so it's fine if they didn't like the work for various reasons, but the comparisons, it makes me feel uncomfortable, because they're not really fair, actually, because those opportunities aren't available to me by virtue of the fact that those spaces aren't growing yet, in a same stage of development.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's why I want to speak out and speak through my work, but also around my work at any given point. I always make sure that there's some platform for exchange, whether it's in writing or whether it's in a post-show talk, so that people understand these things, not to mitigate whether they like the work or not. You know, that's up to them. They might hate it, and I'm fine with that. But it's to help them understand, actually, you can't compare me directly to the Pina Bausch's or to these, you know, other Western contemporary choreographers who have, you know, had a lot more of a leg up in that situation.
Yeah. Yes. And it gives a fuller context, doesn't it? A fuller context and a more like 360 understanding of the whole work, not only the finished product that you see on the stage.
Yeah, and it's difficult because it's always a contentious issue when you want people, especially critics or whomever, because they're the ones who share that space out to people who might come and watch it, and lay people. And, you know, meritocracy is fine if we're all on an equal playing field, but we're not. And so therefore, how do you write in that space with a bit of responsibility to show that actually we're trying to diversify our stages, but if we label everyone, if we start to treat everyone exactly the same when this person's had a leg up their whole life and this person hasn't, you know, how do we then start to have a more nuanced discussion about that at the same time as programmers are trying to fill that space with more diverse work? You know, it's a baptism of fire for someone like me to be put on Sadler's main stage, you know, which I deserve to be there. I fully believe that. But it is a baptism of fire because they're going to liken me to the same as someone else that has a lot more resource put on that stage. And I need to reconcile to myself that, no, I don't want to have a handout or be a token gesture, but that actually we view a lot of things through a Western lens, and that doesn't serve some of the work that I'm doing and many other people are doing. Mm-hmm. So how do we find how to work within that space better?
It's really interesting as well as like seeing the platform as in, you know, the performance space, but also this opportunity for conversation, and that this platform for some artists might just be about the performance and that's it, but that you're also thinking about, you know, I suppose it connects back to the ripples of what will you be able to speak about, and how will you be able to have conversations and allow or enable people to think about things in a way that actually impacts in how they interact with the world in the future.
And some people want to do that work and some people don't. And so I try to pride myself on having work that works on all of those levels, that if it's just about enjoying something as an entertainment, then they have my word as an artist that I've put the best quality that I can up onto that stage with the resource that I have. But if they want to go further, which I hope they would, then I also allow that, you know, myself to be open for that conversation too.
Thank you so much, Seeta Patel. You are a beast. Absolute beast.
Thank you.
Yes.
Feeling full.
With my little kitten. With my half tiger, half panther kitten in tow.
Thank you for listening. You can connect to us and our guests via the links in each episode's show notes. Before you go, we invite you to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the goodness to come. And if you enjoyed today, perhaps tell a friend to tell a friend. We are always grateful for you, our listeners, for our fabulous guests, and to everyone who has contributed to and been a part of our journey here.
Our music is by Tomo Carter. Everything else is brought to you by us, the PowerUp Power Team.
I'm Ella Mesma.
I am Amma Rouge. And we are PowerUp Podcast.